Hello, friends. My name is Host Eric. I am the host of Talking with Famous People and your number one fan. I'm a real cheerleader for you and whatever it is you're doing, no matter how stupid. That's not, just ignore me. I don't know what I'm talking about. Who is this guy? Who is this guy who thinks he knows what he's talking about? What a goofball. He must be taking goofballs and pep pills or something to be acting like that. That guy. Who does he think he is? Well, you may say, Eric, where'd you go? Why'd you get up all of a sudden? Well, I heard the Trouble's outside meowing for food. So I was like, okay, Trouble, hold on a second. Let me get you something to eat here. And then I'll start telling you my real story. This is such an exciting story. You're probably going to shit your pants. You're probably going to shit your pants 6 times. That's how exciting this story is going to be. When I get around to telling you. I haven't started yet, so. So, okay, my exciting story, right. We'd almost lost everything. Our wives, our horses, our fortunes, when all of a sudden, Magellan said, hey, look, it's South America. Let's plunder that. No, wait, that's not my story either. But don't let that convince you that I don't have a story. I do have one. I really do have a story. I wasn't lying when I said that. Now, will the story prove to be quite as exciting as I may have built it up to be? Probably not. But still, it will qualify as a story of some sort. And I checked before I started. Turns out you're desperately in need of a story. So that should work out fine. Fucking thing. Stop being like that. God. Why you gotta be like that all the time? Everything's so difficult all the time. Just stop. Just stop being like that. Be different. There, that's better. Finally, we can relax a little bit. We can take it easy for a second. The panicking phase can transition into a less panicky phase. Hi, Andre. Boy, do I have a story for you. Your mind is gonna be blown, Andre, when you hear this story. Chris, Chapman, you too. I'm glad you're here because, boy, I've got to tell somebody about this. So. Just settle in. Don't get too alarmed. Just sit down. Just make sure you're comfortable. Settle in. It's going to be a while. It's a long story. So, tonight, Rachel and I went out to dinner with my friend and his girl. It was a lot of fun. We went to 2E's. And we chatted. We had dinner. And we chatted for a good solid 2 hours. And then the place was closed and we had to get out of there. But you know it's a good outing when you're still standing by the car after sitting in the restaurant because you have to leave. And you're still chatting and it's freezing cold. And you're like, we got to get in our car. It's too cold. That's a good outing. Dave's my oldest friend in the sense the person I've known as a friend longer than anybody else. Which is, I met him when I was 3 years old. He's 4 years older than me, but we became friends right away. And we've been friends ever since. I'm 50 years old now. It's a 47-year friendship. Grew up 2 houses down from me. It's a delight going out to dinner with them with Rachel because it's like, what's wrong with this chick that Eric should bring around this time? It's normally the kind of thing that I think everybody kind of expects. Like, Eric does not know how to pick them, so let's see what kind of disaster he's bringing around this time. It's not that way with Rachel. I feel very safe and comfortable with her as my significant other. That she's gonna get along great with my friend. That they're gonna say like, "Hey, we really like Rachel," and stuff like that. Dave has had dinner with me and Rachel before, but this is the first time that me, Dave, Natalie, and Rachel all had dinner together. Hi, Octavia Silva. It was very satisfying, very nice. A lot of good conversation. I guess I feel a little bit like maybe I talked a little too much. But even saying that is probably misleading. Like, I was being asked a lot of questions too. I'm being asked to explain certain things. So, you know how I get when I'm explaining things. When I'm responding to somebody's question directly, like Dave wanted me to explain, for example, wanted me to explain the dark web to him. So it's, I try to always be attentive to how much of the conversational space I'm taking over as the talker and limit that because I don't want to be socially awkward. But if you're being asked questions like, explain the dark web, okay, well, I can do that, actually, but it'll take a second, and I'm going to have to kind of round up my thoughts here about it. So I end up maybe explaining a little longer than I want to. But, Dave wants to know the answer. He's genuinely interested in the answer to the question, so... Dave and Natalie are a great couple. They've been together for a long-ass time now. They're also, typologically, a strange couple. There's ISFP and an ISFJ. It's like, it was very obvious a couple of things at the table, which is, number one, the two girls were NI users and the two guys were SI users. That was very obvious. Number two, that me, Dave, and Rachel were all FE and Natalie's FI. That was very obvious to me as well. Number three, that Natalie's NE polar. That's very obvious to me. It's like... I'm so immersed in the typological community. When I go out to dinner with those people, it's not like I'm saying, oh, I want to talk typology, but they were asking me questions and seemed genuinely interested in knowing the answers to and I was trying to kind of... Okay, the quick summary of the TE facts of the dark web is, if you want to access... Basically, the thing I was explaining is that the reason it's called the dark web is that if you want to go buy drugs on the internet or something, you're not going to go to a regular HTTP kind of web page. It's probably not even maybe using... it's definitely not using domain names, the what is domain name registry, and it's not using the central like direct traffic stuff of the internet. Instead, it's more like old school BBS or a Usenet or something like that, where... Yeah, and this is just my guess. This is me explaining from what I assume is basically how it works. So you go on Tor, the Onion router, probably have a VPN as well, but you're directing your data to some like board that has no URL, and then from there probably being directed to other equivalent spaces that function like Pirates Bay kind of, but where all of the data in and out is being split up into a bunch of different packets and being sent along with a bunch of different things, so it's impossible to tell what's being said by whom, to whom, or in what context. Now, Tor is not completely it's not completely foolproof, but it is, based on what Snowden released, it is basically, if the government's going to get in and catch what you're, and be able to decrypt what you're doing via Tor, they have to get in before you enter into Tor, basically. But yeah, I mean, I get why people would want an explanation about it. Why is it called the dark web exactly, and how's it different? Well, mainly what it's different is because it's not trying to be a public thing that's engaged with internet routing and domain name lookup and search and stuff. Rather, it's trying to be like the old internet where there's some space mutually accessible that's being hosted on some computer someplace, but it's intentionally avoiding the shit that normally makes stuff visible to people or findable, Anyway, that was just one thing that came up at the very end, because we were talking about Corey and what happened with Rachel and the party and stuff. Because Dave and Natalie know Corey, and at the very, very end, as we're out by the car, I mentioned it's kind of tricky figuring things out with Corey because he's a little projecty onto me and a little defensive / I guess you'd say insecure or something. But what was interesting was that Natalie just sort of NISC'd the shit out of that. Yeah, Corey's very puffed up and blah 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 blah. Like, she didn't suggest in what she had to say that she really ever had a lot of respect for Corey, whereas I don't feel that way at all. I feel sorry and sad that it is this way, but it doesn't really make me lose any respect for him because it was never the FE anyway, right? It linked to the FE in the sense that it was comfortable to know that we're sort of on the same communication page, but my affection / respect for Corey stems from the fact that he and I are very compatible in the same way that Rachel and I are compatible. Our values line up and shit, And I respect his intuition, which is very robust. And I respect his aesthetics and stuff like that. But it's that's one of the problems with I guess maybe you might say a type 3 INFJ is, it's he's not satisfied really by any kind of FE because he's supposed to be FEing his instrumental. And he wants to be satisfied like anybody does, but for him with NI and TI and NE, well, NI alone, no matter how great it is, can't beat all three of them together. How do you type SE Polar? I mean, I don't have any, I don't have any singular particular test that I use. There's a lot of, I mean, in general, when I ask people to self-report on SE, I ask them about task completion, I ask them about missed opportunities, regret versus seizing opportunities kind of things. I might ask them about where they get their satisfaction. Tell me something about their SE. I mean, there's a lot of ways in which I can pin down sort of where SE might be or might not be, but Octavio Silva says, here's a says here's an SE Polar test. Well, let's see what it looks like. Open link a new window. There. Super Hexagon is a game in which a player must turn a cursor around to avoid oncoming hazards. With the middle hexagon being the axis and the triangle being the cursor, the green bars being the hazard which needs to kill the player. I'm reading this right now. Super Hexagon tests SE in the following ways. Requires good reaction time and understanding of how to navigate a physical space. Prompts the player to make a split-second decision testing the pulling the trigger aspect of SE. So the prediction here is that Polar SE users will find the game to be difficult to understand and become frustrated by it quickly. Higher SE users will find it enjoyable and want to master it. Huh. I'd have to play it probably to see. Well, let me look at the gameplay
Super
video.
Hexagon. Dim.
Oh my god, I already hate this fucking game. I already hate this game so much. Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you're saying there. I think Octavio Silva. This probably is a great SE test. The reality is, though, it's probably not going to work as an actual test. And the reason for that is it's committing too much energy to one testing angle. It's like the amount of information I could get from this doesn't justify the amount of time and energy it will require to use this as a test. It's kind of like the Tower of London thing. I really regret a lot having ever included the Tower of London test on that one thing I made about ways you might test TE, because of course that's a terrible way to test TE, even though it might be a TE test. And the reason it's a terrible way to test TE is because it's only testing your ability to act as a action form of TE, and it's something that is hard to evaluate, like how well someone does on it, because anybody can get it right. It's just you're supposed to get it in the fewest number of steps. Except to have it be a meaningful test, I'd have to have a lot of data on it. I'd have to gradually accrue data on it, and it probably wouldn't ultimately end up being informative, because the thing is, because it's a game, it's gonna link a lot to people's relationship with games, which may or may not link directly to the function. I think in this instance it probably does with the SE thing here, better than the Tower of London does, because there's just, it's like, even if it does test ordinality, the Tower of London test, I've got quicker, easier ways to test ordinality. People like the idea and get enamored with the idea of that test because it's a game, so it's like, oh, I can do that game, so I must have great TE. Okay, well, at least I like this a lot better than that, because I can tell already I fucking hate that game. This game that you just showed there, Super Hexagon, I can't fucking stand it, and I've never played it. Just watching it makes me want to just go, oh, no, this game looks terrible. What's the point? You're not going anywhere. You're always just trying to avoid things that are coming at you. Terrible, terrible game. Thanks, Heartbreak Kid 5231. I'm not always active, but I am more active than most YouTube channels, probably. Well, SE8 dislikes it actively. Without even trying it, I hate it. So, I don't know what to tell you about that. I would be so frustrated with it too, I think. And I'm not polar. I would probably do better than Lich. That's the other thing, is like, if I were to use that as a test, it's not a bad idea to try it. I'd have to try it out, and it might actually end up being an excellent way to incorporate a little bit of a different element into a session. If I could get it, if it turned out to play out as a test quick enough, and if it turned out to trigger predictable kind of exclamations from people, it might be a great idea to incorporate it, Octavius Silva. It's just I guess I'm coming into hearing about this with a little bit of pre-bias against it because of my experience with people making too much of the Tower of London test. But this is different, and this is a much better test of SE polar than Tower of London is of TE polar. So, it can't definitively test it, Eliana, until and unless, first of all, we'd have to discover whether it does. I'd have to do the test a bunch of times, and across a large population of people note, oh, it turns out like every fucking INTP says the same thing, or some variation on it, like, wait, what am I supposed to do here? I don't get the, And if it turns out that way, then it could actually end up being pretty definitive. But it would still be probably only definitive for, half virgins, probably not total non-virgins. If somebody knew precisely what those correlates were that I was looking for besides their actual capacity to play the game well, then those wouldn't be useful because people could try to project that, or not as useful, not as reliable. So I'd have to find out. We'd have to find out whether it is or not. It sounds good conceptually here. It intuitively feels correct that Octavia Silva has correctly articulated that it's an SE test, and it tells you about somebody's SE capacity and their valuing of it potentially. It all intuits out well, but in order for it to actually be that, would require me to gather and SI a bunch of data so that I know whether Joe's reaction to it is that let's say Joe's an INFP and Joe reacts to it like meow. I need to have a bunch of instances of other INFPs who also react like meow before I could conclude that his reacting like meow was something that linked to his SE slot rather than him personally and particularly. Oh, you as an ISFP, you find it very enjoyable? Okay, well that might be true and might be useful, but I would point out that how much somebody enjoys something is kind of hard to measure. I have a question. When you say people act on their perceived type, but when they find out their true type, they have a hard time accepting it, but eventually come to terms with it, and if they do come to terms with their new type, do they start acting on their new true type? Okay, so what I think about this is that for people who have themselves mistyped, they have some kind of understanding of relationship with their type. It could be aspirational, like, I'd like to be more like this type description. It could be sort of disinterested description. I think this one is the description that's most like me. It could be an interested relationship with it, like this is the one I want to pretend I am because it feels good to have these great attributes that I now get as a benefit of being this label or something. But regardless of what their approach towards it is, the thing is, they're going to use the map in the same way they always use maps. So for me, typology is informative. For somebody who is for somebody who's, let's say, NI third, typology may present that which is most determinate. Like, this is the singular determinate truth. For me, it's more like it's informative in the sense that, as I said in a little video earlier today, I can see myself through the lens of the words that are in typology, whereas prior to having those words, I couldn't do that. I didn't have the capacity to note myself ignoring my intuition in a sort of boneheaded display of too much SI and the potato touch story. In other words, I wouldn't have remembered the potato touch story, nor had any meaning made of it, were it not for typology. Because typology informs my metacognition. It allows me to note things that happen and say to myself, oh, okay, I see what happened here. I was paying attention like this, but the circumstances demanded this kind of attention. And so, in that regard, it's informative to me about myself and the world. But for somebody who's got NI in a second or fourth slot or sixth slot or eighth slot, let's say they've got both NI and TI as instrumental values. Well, for them, truths are not informative. That suggests that the truth doesn't change, but you become more informed the more of it you get exposed to. For people who don't have NI and TI as absolute values, the truth is used for some other thing that's upheld as an absolute value. So, in other words, when they first had themselves mistyped, they were using type to uphold a different value than the truth or correctness anyway. And when I tell them they've got themselves mistyped, they're going to say, you can't use type like that. Type doesn't work like that. Type is something that I decide about myself, because truths are things that I use to do things. So it's true that I'm an INFJ because I'm using that truth to make videos about being an INFJ. So that's the truth I'm using. That's what I'm using it for, and it's working fine. So why would you get in the way of that? Because you're not an INFJ. Well, no, but see, that truth is inconsistent with what I'm doing here, says the instrumental NI person. And they're fundamentally going to be resentful in some circumstances because I'm telling them, not only am I saying you got your type wrong, what I'm really saying is you relate maps and realities wrong. You value them wrong. And accordingly, there's something wrong with you. That's how it's going to be interpreted. So, fair enough, Octavia. So, you know what? That's a great explanation you just put there, too. I just thought about it in the same way as when any DOMs are presented with any questions, they see it as an opportunity to play. That's how I feel about this test. Octavia Silva says about the that horrible game. Yeah, that's a great explanation, Octavia Silva. I appreciate that. That draws to my attention something I'd not really ever thought about much before, which is, I probably haven't and really sink in that much. It is the case that any DOMs, when presented with any style questions, definitely see it as an opportunity to play and an opportunity to show off and stuff, especially the EHPs. We'll probably do it, tomorrow or the next day. It's kind of a production doing the type police things, so I mean, not that big of a production, but like when I say, okay, Rachel, let's crank out a couple of these TP videos, and then at that point, hi Eric Thor. At that point, we have to get this OBS set up just so. And the reason is because I've got these different elements I gotta go. I've got this template that's set up, right? But because of the way OBS is, it's just for various reasons, I gotta do a lot of setting shit up, okay? And then I gotta move the couch, then we gotta put on our costumes, I gotta move I get second mic out. It's a lot of like, alright, we're gonna do type police videos. So when we do them, like we did 2 back to back today, I would have liked to do 3, but the second one took 30 minutes. This is actually a 30-minute long video. The first one was a 10-minute long video. Yes, I did compose the song. Yes, I am the one singing it. And yes, we are all just passengers on Eric Thor's Journey boat. That's the important thing to remember. I appreciate Boba Fett reminding me of that. No matter what else happens, remember that we are all ultimately merely passengers on Eric Thor's Journey boat. I'm so glad. So now is the time that I'm going to just say, we can... I wonder what it's going to be about. I can't do a very good Eric Thor imitation. I need to spend some time watching him, practicing imitating him. Then I'll be able to do a good job. But you know, I'm not quite as bad as an INTP, but like the INTP, ENTPs kind of hate practice. Even when we should practice, we're like, I got it good enough. It's fine. Even though we don't. We're kind of constantly lying to ourselves about whether we've had enough practice. Hey, good work, Octavia Silva, across the board there. I think it's a good suggestion. My initial hesitation poo-pooed it a little bit more than perhaps I should have. After I looked at it more, I increasingly became thinking, you know what, actually... She may be spot on the money here with this thing. It may actually prove to be integratable, but it will, like any new test, require me to gather a bunch of data before I start to really trust it. That's just being an SI person. Practice is an SI thing. The funny thing is, you know who some of the best practicers are? INFJs. They're great practicers, but it's totally non-willful, like super unconscious. He uses. What do I use? Do you use a DAW? DAW? I don't know what a DAW is. I use my microphones and my sound card and Audacity and my acoustic guitar and LLMS, which is like a how to make beats, make up beats app. Oh, digital audio workstation. Do I? Is that considered a digital audio workstation? Does that mean just computer? Do you make music on your computer? Is that what he's really saying there? Yes, I do make music on my computer. A sequencer. Yeah, right. But see, it's more than just a sequencer, isn't it? I mean, it is. I don't have a MIDI keyboard, but it is super set up for MIDI. So I don't use the MIDI aspect of it, but it's kind of made for MIDI. But in that regard, it's a sequencer. But you can use it without MIDI, so I guess even then you still call it a sequencer, probably. The point is, I use it to make beats. Whatever you want to call it. Okay. It's free. I use the free apps. Audacity's free, and so is LMMS. I can never remember if it's 2 L's or 2 M. LMMS. Those are both free applications that you can get for free. I used to use different kind of audio apps periodically. When I had the Adobe suite, I used Audition's mastering algorithms when I'd master things, but I still end up making it in Audacity. It's just I have so many hours put into using Audacity that it's an accumulated skill resource, I guess. I'm really fast at it. Okay, Jeffrey. What do I think of the Ukraine situation? Well, normally when people ask me that, I say, I don't want to talk about it, it's depressing. But since you're asking me, and you've got a good reason to be asking this kind of question, I will give you a serious answer to the question. Which is, the current situation with Ukraine and Russia actually dates back quite a few years to the time right after Glasnost, when the Soviet Union split into Russia, and then the various little Eastern Bloc countries went back to some degree of independent countries. Some of them split in half, like Czechoslovakia split into the Czech Republic and Slovakia, and some of them are just what they were before the Soviet Union took them over, like Ukraine. So, at the time when Ukraine left the Soviet Union, they had a lot of nuclear missiles. A lot of Soviet nuclear missiles were stationed in the Ukrainian part of what was then the Soviet Union, but now it's Ukraine, but they didn't move the missiles. So Ukraine's got all these Soviet nuclear missiles. They don't really want them, and the West, meaning the U.S. mostly, but also like NATO countries, say to Ukraine, we don't want you to have those nuclear weapons. We don't think you know how to take care of them. Give them to us. And Ukraine said, fine, make us part of NATO, though, because we're afraid Russia might someday attack us. And the U.S. was like, okay, well, how about we promise to really be behind you if they attack? Well, if you really make that promise, America, why don't you make us part of NATO? Because we're going to give you these Minsk protocols instead. The Minsk protocols basically were the U.S. promising to help Ukraine if Russia ever attacked, which we signed, and they gave us their nuclear weapons, and which, if we were to adhere to the letter of them, we would currently be fighting Russia with military force, but which is nevertheless weaker and therefore almost guaranteed to not end up in military force than an actual treaty commitment like NATO. So, as a consequence, because Ukraine decided, look, we want to get rid of the nuclear weapons more than we want legitimate promises of security, and or we don't want to leverage getting rid of the nuclear weapons to attain those promises. Even though they knew they needed that protection at the time, that's why they were asking for it, they didn't get it. And even though the United States knew they needed it, they didn't get it. And in part, that's because they didn't meet certain criteria for a country that the other NATO countries meet. In other words, well, what do you have to offer Ukraine besides needing us? And the answer was nuclear weapons. Well, we already have plenty of those, says NATO, but we don't want you to have those. But is that really enough for you to make us part of NATO? And then if you don't have them anymore, well, then you don't have anything to offer us, right? So, in that regard, NATO didn't really want to have Ukraine. It's just a burden. And as a consequence, back then, this splitting the baby in half, in other words, the people on the Ukrainian side who were TE oriented, outcome oriented, and the people on the US side and NATO side who were outcome oriented, TE oriented, said, hey, look, we just need solutions here. We need solutions, we need answers, okay? It doesn't need to be right. It doesn't need to make sense. We just need those weapons to come over here. And basically, that's what we need to have happen here. And the Ukrainians go, yeah. We don't need to resolve things in a logically consistent fashion or mean things we say, because we're just trying to get shit accomplished here. We just need these impacts and outcomes. Well, as always happens, anytime logic doesn't come first in public policy, it creates this clusterfuck of disaster called the guaranteed invasion of Ukraine by Russia eventually. Because what are the Minsk protocols in actuality? They are a document that formally indicates to everybody that NATO will not defend Ukraine if Russia attacks. That's basically what they are. Because simply by being the alternative to actually being put into NATO. It doesn't matter what they say. Because nobody means to enforce it, and nobody wants to commit to anything in any meaningful way. We're going to pretend words don't mean things. And that way we'll get those nuclear weapons transferred over here. Well, they did that, and at that moment, when the TE people won, when the impact calculi people won, when the utilitarians won over the logic people, those utilitarians set in motion the guaranteed invasion, eventually, of Ukraine by Putin's forces, as is occurring now. Now, Putin he's what you call street smart, impact smart. He waited till Trump was out of office to attack Ukraine. If I were president, he wouldn't be attacking Ukraine. If I were president and he did attack Ukraine, then, the funeral for Putin would be held shortly thereafter, and they'd be electing their new president because of the massive strikes that would have targeted wherever he most likely is. And that would have been the end of Putin's threat to world security. I just told you. But I get that when you typed that, I hadn't yet told you. So I do understand that when you typed the question, you just said, what would I do to stop it? I had not yet told you. So it was a fair question to ask. So there's your answer on Ukraine. Jeffrey, blame the utilitarians, like always. Okay, so Jeffrey, this is a key thing. This is, again, is what you call idiots, the poisoning of public policy by idiots, okay? So here's the thing. When Party A is the aggressor on innocent Party B, then they forfeit any reasonable expectation to not be attacked. And as long as the violence is clearly, directly responsive to that aggression, then that responsive violence is legitimate. So the thing is, it is a mistake to say we'd be getting into another war. When we went into the Middle East, we did not have any legitimate reason to use force. So we didn't go into Iraq because Iraq had invaded Kuwait. And even if we had gone into it for that reason, we would have done what the first President Bush did, which is use as much responsive force as is necessary to put a stop to the behavior and not attempt some sort of regime change bullshit. There was no justification for the U.S. entering the Middle East when Bush 2 did it. The linkage via 9/11 is irrelevant smoke and mirrors nonsense that had nothing to do with whether or not we had justification to invade Iraq. So, and is incredibly weak justification even for attacking Afghanistan. So there's nothing comparable there. The fact that the U.S. has done a shitty job in the past of correctly using force doesn't mean we shouldn't correctly use force now. If Eric were always president, it would always be used correctly. And it would always result in good outcomes as a consequence. That's the thing. When we actually put correctness ahead of our predicted outcomes, surprise, surprise, we get better outcomes. Because nobody's as good as predicting outcomes as being correct. Not if it's directly responsive violence against an initiating aggressor. It follows immediately in the time frame. It's explicitly stated as responsive, and it's trying to put an end to a nation that has forfeit its expectation of sovereignty in that area by choosing to engage in unjustified violence. Well, like I said, first of all, Jeffrey, if I were in office, Putin wouldn't have invaded Ukraine. The U.S. gave him plenty of cues in advance to his invasion that it wasn't going to do anything. The world did as well. So, for Putin to invade Ukraine, first, he checked with the world. Hey, is it cool if I invade Ukraine? And everybody said yes. No, it would have sounded like this. Putin, do not use any military force against Ukraine. It would be completely unjustified, and if you do so, you will forfeit my respect of your sovereign status as a nation and your legitimacy as a leader. Take that for what you think it may mean, or not. I'm not gonna. There's no reason to explain further than that. And that's all I'm gonna say about the shit. And then if he does, here come the fucking Tomahawk missiles. And we're not gonna play proxy war. I'm not gonna attack his forces in Ukraine. I'm going straight for the fucking Kremlin. Because when you fuck around like a little bitch, bullies understand that. And when you don't, bullies run in terror. Oh, real Klaus Schwab. You have no concept of how public narrative works then, if you think that. None. Zero. You're just believing fairy tales that you make up in your freaking potato box or something. I don't know. You just didn't understand that what the way the narrative went on Ukraine. It may have been made of whatever words it was, but functionally what it was Putin saying, "Hey, is it cool if I invade Ukraine?" And the rest of the world saying yes. That's the fucking truth. Klaus, the reason is I have been steadfastly refusing to talk about Ukraine since the beginning of this whole shit, trying to ignore it, knowing that it was going to end in disaster and not want to pay any attention to it because I find it depressing. As I've explained on many occasions. Just because I don't talk about something online doesn't mean it doesn't exist in my life. From this point forward, what's the best thing each side can do? I mean, the best thing Putin can do, from Putin's perspective, is just keep on and keep on. And he'll have Ukraine conquered soon enough. The best thing from Ukraine's perspective it could do is fight as long and hard as it can and hope the world comes to its senses. And the best thing the U.S. could do is elect Eric president and then let him handle shit. I'm not president, Klaus. Until I am as a private citizen, it's perfectly fine for me not to fixate on depressing things that I don't feel like being depressed by. Sorry. I mean, you could make that complaint if I were in office. You'd say you're not fulfilling your duty in office. That would be fine, sure. But I'm not in office, so I don't have that duty. Duh. If I were elected in 2024, what my first actions be? It's impossible to say what my first actions would be, because if you're asking what would my first actions be about Ukraine, well, in 2024 the facts will be very different. So I'll have to evaluate it contextually. You know, if you're talking about some sort of general agenda outside of Ukraine, what would I do in 2024? I mean, I have multiple threads of agenda, you know, namely foreign policy, domestic policy, and what I would call executive branch policy, like how to deal with the cabinet and shit, right? And exactly what order, I mean, the beginning of any presidency would involve necessarily me sort of setting all that shit up and saying, okay, so like, this is my cabinet, here's my agenda. But my agenda is sort of set out like in my platform, but the platform is more of a, here's what the country ought to do in general, not a, here's what I'm going to attempt to accomplish as president. I am much more realistic in my understanding of what can be done than any platform ever could be, you know. Is the rapture coming soon? The Rapture. Is that boy band from Korea? Do they sing, "Come on, Jesus, carry me away"? I'm so rapturously excited, and hey, look at that. I'm in heaven. I guess I must be chosen. Told you, motherfuckers. Oh, you're a bad Christian. You gotta stay down there with the Muslims and stuff. I'm up here. Why? I was a good Christian. I practiced a vigorous form of good Christian gloating. And still I do. What I'm saying, Klaus Schwab, is, do you think it's unrealistic? So if I had said, we will attack Russian forces in Ukraine, would that be realistic? Or no, is that not realistic either? Use words well, please. I'm saying it wouldn't. The logic of mutually assured destruction does not change until one party escalates. It's not shrugged off. It's well established now through multiple decades of foreign policy data. Are you saying it would lead to nuclear war if we attacked Russian troops in Ukraine? So in other words, if you need to make a decision about how much apocalyptic talk you want to have control your decision making. You need to make a decision, right? Because it's true that standing up to Putin in any way could lead to nuclear war. It's also true that standing up to China in any way could lead to nuclear war. Now, how much of a slave to that reality do you want to be? That's the real question. And if you're going to be utilitarian in your frame of reference, you are saying, I want to be a slave to whomever makes threats. Don't misunderstand that you're committing to a frame, not just a specific position here. You know, don't think that's not the case. That's definitely so. You're committing to a frame, not just a specific position. You're committing to the idea that articulating risks is sufficient to determine what one ought to do, regardless of the realities. I mean, then you're saying, I will always give in under the not even the direct threat, but the potential increasing risk of nuclear war. But I mean, let's say it didn't go to nuclear war and it were just conventional war. Why is that? Would that be so much better? I mean, the thing is, let's say we could avoid the war entirely by just giving up and giving in to Putin. Would that be better? In other words, you have to make a real decision. Util is a way of avoiding a real decision. It's saying, I don't know what's going to happen, so I'm going to default towards fear. You know? And a moral person says, I do know what justice is. When you have clarity on the moral high ground, oh my God, don't give that up willingly. That's the most powerful tool you can possibly have. And if you say you're using util, you're giving up all of your moral high ground. It doesn't matter how much somebody victimizes anybody. If they've got nuclear weapons, you'll never stand up to them. No, I'm saying that because you're saying I'm going to use apocalyptic talk and a util calculus here, that pattern of behavior, because of the specifics of weapons of mass destruction, means that you are capitulating to always giving in to nuclear powers. That it doesn't, you can't pretend as though this is, that next time you're going to take it seriously. Your believability plummets instantly. So now nobody believes the U.S. will do anything if you are a nuclear armed state pushing people around, because we've not done something for such a long time. No, we don't negotiate around nuclear. There's nothing to negotiate. We don't escalate. That's it. Then the logic of mutually assured destruction continues to define the frame of reference for everybody. That wouldn't be assassinating a president, would it, Klaus? And we've established why, but you've chosen to ignore the argument. Because the initiative act of violence invalidates or forfeits the sovereign claims of the leader of that nation, because they have ceased to be a legitimate nation state, or now a rogue state. Responsive violence, especially that which is promised essentially in the Minsk protocols, is not only justified, it would probably be upheld by an international court of law even, which is a crazy high standard that no other U.S. military force ever meets. It's like, hey, we did a shitty job of using this bug poison before. We sprayed it all around this house that had no bugs and killed a bunch of cats. When you walk into the house that's literally crawling, ceiling to floor with roaches, and go, nah, you gotta remember that bad time we had using this bug poison last time with the cats and stuff, we better not use it. You have really clusterfucked your way into a wrongness pile. And that's what's going on here. It is true that idiots have made use of force by the United States seem quite like the toxic thing to always avoid. Because they're not evaluating it the way I am now. And they have not been. Because, as I've always said, if you don't want clusterfucks of disaster, make things be legitimate first. Justified correctly. Everybody understands this, right? Like, Putin is the aggressor, that responsive violence is responsive, and that at that point it's up to Putin whether he can just leave it alone at that point and then expect things to stop, or he can continue to push it. Everybody understands that. He understands that too. He may not say it, but he understands it too. And it defines the frame for everybody. I mean, NATO is needed for what exactly? Well, obviously, NATO is needed for you to not get invaded by Russia. You know, that's what it's needed for, apparently. You don't think Estonia is next? Really? You sure about that? You Googled it? I mean, it's very reminiscent of, we got a guy named Pitler and a guy named, what's his fucking name? A guy named Pitler and a guy named Pemberlin back in a thing called Pearl Poor Poo. Very reminiscent of a guy called Putin and a guy called Biden. In the sense that, oh, I'm sure we can ignore, appease, sanction, hissy fit our way to success. That's gonna work great. And warm water ports. Don't threaten us only warm water ports. Yeah. Hey, come on. You forgot about how the Nazis need a bunch of land for growth, remember? So they can spread their people out more. That was the official explanation for why they needed to go take over whatever. Yeah, Europeans cannot stop fighting each other. Europeans love going to war. They go to war over everything. One time in the year 1236, there was a guy in Portugal who sneezed on a duke from England, threw the whole country into war for like 100 years. Just because one guy sneezed on another guy. Europe goes to war over anything. Look, the other thing is everybody in Europe, including Russia, knows this. If we Europeans want to continue our let's always go to war with each other shit, nobody can go nuclear. Leave Russia alone. Hey, teacher, leave those kids alone. Do you want me to leave China alone when they fuck with India, Boba Fett? How about that? Would you like me to leave China alone in the Himalayas? And you're like, oh no, we can handle China. Andy, you can't handle China for shit. My ass. You can handle China like your mom's vag can handle my cock. Not well at all, because it's too small and it's too huge. Not really. I didn't really ruin your mom's vagina. I'm sorry I said that. Look, the important thing to note as well is this. I got no designs on regime change, no interest in regime change. I got no interest in telling you what to do with your rubble after I'm done blowing it up. I'm not going to send you any help. You figure it out. I don't give a fuck. I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I'm telling you what not to do. And you better not fucking do it. No. Just what I said. I'm not telling anybody what to do. I'm telling them what not to do, right? Don't illegally, immorally, unethically, wickedly, imperialistically invade another sovereign country with no justification, as if it's one of our allies especially, and you're an authoritarian dick. Don't do that. Don't do that on my watch. Would you like me to say something else? Can you imagine me saying anything else that would be a better thing to say than that? If I were president? Do you think there's something else that should be said? Can you conceive of words that contradict that are desirable to be said? No, Klaus, a moral, decent human being, agrees with what I just said. Every voter should vote for a man who says what I just said and who means it. And nobody would dispute what I'm saying unless they're going to bring out a bunch of particular fear elements that, if allowed to win this argument, will end up winning every argument forever. In other words, you can't win the argument this time on appeasing to the nuclear threat without making it more likely for you to do it again next time. It's easier the second time to not have any character. So that's the thing. It's like, and there's no way any other country can say, hey, America, how dare you? How dare I what? I would say as president, right? How dare I say, you don't get to be violent authoritarian imperialists that invade our allies without us doing anything? Are you complaining about that? I'm the one who's stopping all the drone strikes and shit in the Middle East because we got no business doing any of that shit. I'm the one who's returning U.S. policy to sanity. And you're complaining about the fact that I won't tolerate that behavior? There are no reasons even being presented that count as reasons. Nobody's buying for a second any of the narrative work coming out of Russia, okay? Putin is not good enough with his narrative shit to handle that. He's just got to handle checking to see if anybody's actually going to do something, making sure they're not, and then, oh good, now's my chance. Because once it's all over, you know, like in the next election, let's say I were to be elected. Well, at that point, Putin's done with what he's done. I'm done now. Well, now it's a lot harder for me to do anything. It's a lot harder because it's not directly responsive to initiative aggression. And it's not as legitimate a response then at that point. Putin's not an INTJ. Fuck no. Putin's an ESFP, I think. He's an ESFP. Maybe, no, I'm almost sure he's an ESFP. And it's why you saw a kindred spirit in Trump not getting that didn't make them allies at all. You know, Trump was never Putin's ally. No matter how friendly he may have seemed in some spots here and there, Putin could never expect to get away with that shit on Trump's watch. I mean, but then of course, the problem with Trump is the one who made it okay to assassinate Americans when he assassinated an Iranian general on Iraqi soil. And that was totally illegitimate. Unlike an attack on the sovereign state, the formerly sovereign state, but now rogue state of Russia, which would be legitimate. And if it happened to kill Putin, fantastic. That assassination by Trump was actually an assassination and totally illegitimate. And unfortunately, that justifies other people assassinating Americans. Now, I mean, they can use that justification. What can you say? What can we say? Nothing we can really say except, well, yeah, we did that, but it was wrong of us to do that, and that doesn't mean it's okay for you to do it. I mean, it worked at killing that general, and what good did that do us exactly? Oh, phew! Crisis averted. That Iranian general was about to lead an incredibly well-trained and tactically brilliant attack squad or something. No, we didn't. Trump didn't like him. Trump thought he deserved to die for his past behaviors, and that's not an acceptable reason. That's what I'm saying. Is like, if I were to be elected in 2024, as soon as it got clear that was going to happen, Putin would clean up his act and say, "Okay, I'm done with my aggression now." And then I wouldn't really be able to do anything. Because if it's not directly responsive in the right time frame, according to all the things I've said, then it's no longer clean cut. What was allegedly to stop a major attack? No, it's not true, Fly Guy. Look, it's not true. My opinion about ESFPs has genuinely changed. I will admit there was a time when I used to shit on ESFPs a lot. The truth is, it's like there's like one or two ESFPs that I found really annoying, and then a lot of the other people I was thinking were ESFPs were ENFJs. Actually, I think the conflict is most common. I think I'm actually more likely to get into conflict with ENFJs than with ESFPs. Because ESFPs, most healthy ESFPs are willing to allow me my ground because they're comfortable having their own ground. It's like ESFPs who are healthy understand what they themselves are good at, what they like, how they fit in the world, how they're great as they are, right? It's the ones who feel the need to deny me the equivalent kind of space in my areas that probably it's some kind of like not very healthy expression of self that's to blame, not really their ESFP-ness. And on the other hand, I think ENFJs are more likely to come into conflict with me because of that NI second slot, and it comes along with what ends up playing out like a countervalued TI almost in the fourth slot, because they keep without the SI, they keep wanting to collapse things down into holistic shit that's irreducible, and I keep going, you're not doing any work, you're not doing any work, you're not doing any work. Benefactor beneficiary really have trouble seeing eye to eye in general, because they've got, they see each other as having the wrong thing valued. Like, I value the N's and the F's. But for ENFJs, the N's are instrumental. Because I value the N's before I value the F's, that's a problem. And it causes conflict. To the extent that I value the F's as absolute values, it still needs to, it needs additionally to adhere to my operational value of TI. So it's like when F's are conflicting with TI rather than cooperating with it, then it doesn't really matter the F valuing. And I just think this person's is playing enigmatic nonsense. And as I explained in a recent video, you can't learn how to be a better you from your benefactor. You can only get concrete, selfish kind of benefits. Because the only thing you're going to learn from your benefactor is the way to be a better you is to not be you, but to be them. And that's not very helpful, right? Whereas you can learn how to be a better you from your supervisor. Hey, CJ O'Connell's here. It's that famous YouTube streamer guy that I sometimes watch. I don't normally watch streams, but this CJ O'Connell guy, he's got some kind of special going on in his stream. I don't know, something I like about it. It might have something to do with the likelihood of me coming up as a conversation topic. But that's not all. That's not the only reason, okay? He's a pretty smooth streamer, let me tell you. You know, I think more conversation-y. You don't normally really, yeah, you do sometimes just read the chats and stuff. You seem a little bit more conversation-y than I am. A little less, what do you call, monologue-y. Although, you do a shitty job of keeping up with the chat. It makes me realize what a shitty job I do. I think I do an even worse job than you. And I'm like, oh, this is terrible when he doesn't read the chat. Like, I want my thing read. What are you doing? Oh, Eric, you should learn from your own shit here. Okay, I will. Boba doesn't like Biden. Oh, I read that. Aren't you much ire? Aren't me? Is earned the past participle of earn? Or is it earned? I earned. I have earned? Is it really earned? Or is it earned again? I'm wondering now. Okay. It was allegedly to stop a major attack. Nothing wrong with ESFPs. I heart ESFPs. Dear Kay, Amy, I know a few IRL. They're the antidote to the weirdness. Yeah, Amy sent me a great email, actually. I'm learning to trust her emails. Like, normally people send me an email. I like to continue in my state of not knowing what it's about unless I already know what it's about, because I couldn't avoid seeing what it was about when I got a notification. But I let her sit for a few days, and I looked at it. I was like, "Oh, this is another very pleasant, nice idea email." She suggested a topic for me to talk about that she sort of would like to hear about, and that's a great. She does a great job of interacting with me, right? Like, she's very successful at eliciting Eric's response, yeah. Whatever response she wants. In other words, she's good at attaining the impact she wants to attain. And to be good at the attaining the impacts you want to attain is the same thing as basically making me like, it's weird. It's coddling my FI baby. It's like, make sure that every time I read an email from you, it makes me feel happy, and then I'm more likely to read your emails. But it's that simple, you know. It's terrible to be FI polar. The more I understand it, the more I realize, oh, I'm just such a baby. CJ O'Connell says, I don't know. I basically switched between monologuing and conversation. Yeah, after I said that stuff, I thought, okay, I probably generalized out from the fact that I more of your streams that I've watched or heard have involved other people there in a room talking to you, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's representative of your overall streams ratio. So I overreached there in that conclusion. And I am terribly, 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 terribly sorry. Okay? I hope you can forgive me someday for my failure. I I understand if you can't, but that's what I'm hoping. Lady Lou, hello! It's you! How are you doing? Hello, folks. That's another way of spelling folks, but it saves the letter. That's very efficient of you. That's great TE, Lady Lou. Great TE. Lady Lou's out there every day working hard saving us letters. All caps usually draws attention, but usually negative attention. I can tell you what gets me to read stuff most is if it's orange, if it says at talking to the fence people, and if it's got a couple emojis like in the front and the end, I'm probably maybe more likely to look at it or something. It depends how in the middle of yelling at somebody I am. Like when I was mad about somebody trying to push back on my Ukraine policy, I wasn't interested in reading anything about that wasn't about that. It wasn't that thing that I was just yelling about. So then I ignore the chat for a while because I'm mad about something, you know. And don't forget about my feelings and how I'm a baby and everybody has to coddle me constantly. Oh my God, the Asians are here too. Who are the Asians? Is it me? I like to just see where it goes. Nah, mean. Amazingly chill. Nah, mean. Eric, can you type someone by a chat only or voice video is the only one? I will do voice only, but I prefer to have voice and video. But I won't do any typing that doesn't involve me talking to somebody. Like, I have to at least hear your voice. I can't type people from the chat. Plus, it would be super slow and boring and just torturous. If I try, I mean, I suppose on some level, I could probably do, like an 80% job if I laboriously asked a bunch of questions and waited for the person to type in the answers and read the answers and stuff. But, what was I talking about? I don't know. It doesn't matter. The important thing is, fuck no. That sounds like torture. I just read that Stoli Vodka is rebranding their name of vodka, the name of their vodka, to what? Not Russian vodka. Why would Stolichnaya rebrand their vodka? Everybody knows Stoli's good vodka. My time of birth and longitude. It was both midnight and high noon simultaneously, and my longitude was 0. My favorite trope of mine is playing music and getting copyright strikes. I'm surprised you get strikes. I'm surprised they don't just end the stream all of a sudden. That's happened to me before. But yeah, usually if you play very much copyrighted shit anyway, it'll throw up a thing that says like, this has been detected or something, and it kind of just dies. Everything dies. Hopefully they're not strikes, are they? Are they strikes, or are they just copyright notification things? It shouldn't be strikes. They give you at least a chance to trim out the segment. Well, it's not a strike. The copyright Miami. So I get why C.J. O'Connell, if he's not using the word strike literally, would still be using that word because you get a lot of copyright meowings. My favorite part working in a bar was my boss telling me to water down the top shelf stuff with the cheaper brand to save money. When people are drunk, they can't tell the difference. You played a Talking Heads song and it was like copyright detected. Especially in mixed drinks. Well, that's good. Nothing impacting the channel yet, knock on wood, but stuff gets blocked. Yeah. Well, I've gotten pretty good at doing what I want and not getting in trouble, but I don't really ever do any copyrighted stuff. Yes, if I play a cover or something, it'll note it as a copyright thing, but that's not the kind that stops the stream. That's the kind that after the fact they inform you. So, you covered a Billy Joel song. Now, every money that this video gets goes directly to Billy Joel. But that was like 2 minutes of a 6-hour live stream. Why would Billy Joel get all of the money from the live stream? Well, because, that's how important that cover was to your live stream. But they give you the chance to trim out the segment. So I'll usually just trim out the segment. Yeah, it works for covers too. Certain covers. Certain ones, it doesn't identify them. It depends how like famous something is, It always catches me. Billy Joel is like very copyrighty. He's very copyrighty. You can't put up anything with Billy Joel shit in it, or you'll have problems. So, but it does note specifically that it's a cover. It says we've determined you covered this song in this thing. What is the most memorable concert you've ever gone to? That's an interesting question. Most memorable concert. Well, if we were going to go by memorable, then I guess we'd have to go by which one I remember best. Is the most memorable one necessarily the one I remember best? Or could it have been most memorable, but I just failed to remember it anyway? Michelle Shocked is very, very, very copyrighty. So, you don't want to fuck with her. She's copyrighty and spidey too. It was special to me. Well, okay. I guess probably the concert that now looking back I feel most lucky to have gone to is when I was 18 or 19, one of the two. I saw the Pixies at UC Irvine in this, it was like the gym or something, like the secondary shitty gym. It wasn't a venue. It was like literally in a gym. And there was not that many people there. We could walk. It was me and my girlfriend at the time, Dave Porter, the guy I just went and had dinner with Rachel, and his girlfriend at the time. And we could walk right up to the front of the stage, and we all loved the Pixies, but it was like hardly anybody there, and it was in this weird little gym. So that was pretty great. And then it's kind of an SI cool thing. I saw the Pixies again, like maybe 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago at the Rose Bowl. And of course I wasn't able. We were even though we had very good tickets, because Corey got tickets and gave it to me and Dave to go with him and his wife. He had 4 tickets, and he had the tickets to go to the section that it's for special people. You have to go. You have to be special to get into the section. Like, everybody's over here, but we're over here in the special section, where it's like there weren't really any lines for the drink places and stuff inside of there. They had like more fancy drinks and stuff. But anyway, it wasn't right up next to the stage, but it was much better than most of the seating. It wasn't better than the best right up in front of the stage. But it made me then think, well, I mean, it wasn't a lounge, it's just like part of the grass of the Rose, not inside the Rose Bowl. It's on the grass outside of the Rose Bowl. So it's like they just sort of fence off this big section of grass, and it's like a sub fenced off section of grass. And it's got awnings, shit, but they're not awnings, but like a pop up awnings. But it's not like a fancy room or something. Anyways, living in Pasadena. Another concert that sticks out in my mind, actually, is one I saw not super long time ago, maybe 7, 8, 9 years ago. I saw Prince not long before he died at the Forum, and he really put on quite a good show. I was impressed. We had quite good seats too, and it was easy to get good seats for cheap because Prince, like, I don't know, maybe a year before he died, decided for some reason to play like 30 shows at the Forum and charge $25 a seat. It was a strange decision because it made for, like, everybody who wanted to see Prince could see Prince for cheap and get good seats, because most nights there wasn't that many people there because he had so many nights in a row at the Forum for cheap. So we got good seats, and it was like a Tuesday night or something. It was like, Prince was a weirdo. He didn't go on tour, but decides all of a sudden to do this thing at where? The Great Western Forum? Like the oldest, brokenest down venue in Los Angeles. So who knows what made him do what he wants to do, but it was cool. We took advantage of it, and we saw him, me and my ex-wife. And he did something that I found very memorable in that concert, which is he didn't play Darling Nikki after he became a Jehovah's Witness, but in that show, he started the guitar part, and the rest of the band started to play. And everyone in the crowd was like, "Wah!" and then he's like, "Yeah, I don't play that song anymore." Oh, you fucker! Why would you do that to us? But it was memorable. Isn't that a dick move? Is that a total dick move or what? It is. That's a total dick move. Anyway. I remember at the beginning of the show, he got up there, he's like, "Hey, I don't remember exactly how old he was, 50, 52 or something. He's like, "I'm looking pretty sexy for 52 or whatever." And I was like, "Hey, you know what? You do, man. You look the same as you always look. You look like you didn't age a day from back in the day, He looked ages like Dick Clark. For those who are old enough to know that Dick Clark, before he had the stroke, he was known as this ageless, never-changing guy. Another memorable concert I went to was the They Might Be Giants concert I went to, but it was mostly memorable because I went with my first wife, who was very pregnant, or like 6 months, 6 or 7 months pregnant, you know, like not like about to bust pregnant, but pretty pregnant. And I was kind of stressed the whole time as to whether it was too loud for the baby in the womb. So we stood at the very back of the House of Blues. And I enjoyed the music, because I liked They Might Be Giants. I knew most of the songs and kind of sing along with it. But it was mostly memorable because I kept feeling her stomach to see if the baby was kicking. Like if I didn't want to hurt the baby's hearing. I thought, that's stupid, Eric. There's no way it's got to go through all that amniotic fluid. There's no way it's going to be too loud for a baby inside of a uterus, inside of amniotic fluid. But my logic didn't win the argument, because I still fretted about it the whole time I was there. You know? So I shouldn't have even really gone to that show, but it was Winston's mom. You were adding that to the wrong person. Jeffrey knows all these things that I say about util and deontology and stuff. Jeffrey already knows all these things because he's used them in debate rounds and stuff. I've already taught him all these things. He's easy to teach. Pick shit up like bam, 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 you know, like instantly. So he knows. Like, I'm sure you come in here, take over for me, and do a pretty solid job of winning the arguments himself if it were just on those kind of topics, like debate style shit, like framework stuff. He's pretty well versed in those arguments at this point. The thing is, also, as an HP, I find it important to control the frame. Like, you can try to present util as proponents say this, opponents say that, but that's just conceding the frame to util. I don't like that. My point is, I'm at war with it. So I'm not going to teach it as though it's a sort of false neutrality. Because then I'm just playing into that bullshit, you know? Yeah, that's the Jeffrey of Jeffrey's mom's fame. Jeffrey's mom. She does have a name. I'm sure she'd probably appreciate it if I learned her name. Since she always says, "Hi, this is Meh Meh." But I'm sorry, Jeffrey's mom. You have a Chinese name. And so I refuse to learn it. I never made that decision or anything, but you're just Jeffrey's mom. No, it's some Chinese name. It's like, it's not Lao Tzu, but that's what I want to call it. It's like that kind of syllables, you know. It sounds like that kind of. It just has that vibe. That my name is Lao. Hi, Mr. Strauss. You know, because they're Chinese. No matter how much they understand and get, and that I'm super casual, she will never stop calling me Mr. Strauss. It's like, why are you calling me Mr. Strauss? You and I have had such like intimate conversations. I've had more deep conversations with this woman than any other person in my life that's not been a lover of some sort, right? Because this woman comes to me with her anxieties about her kids and her anti-polar, like, there seem to be things I can't SITE. What will I do? Oh my goodness. Something I can't SITE? But that's not possible. There can't be something else determinate besides my TESI. Well, it's just this whole like hierarchy thing that's built into Asian cultures with respect and social positioning and shit. The reason I get along with that family so well is because she's an ESTJ, so she doesn't really care about that shit very much. The dad's an ISTP, so he doesn't care about that shit very much. The son's an ENTP, so like he yells at me sometimes. Like he and I he yelled at me the other night. I was like, "You motherfucker!" And he was like, "Yeah, maybe you should read the book." You know, like. But I'm busy telling you why I'm not gonna read the book until you have a reason for me to read it. In other words, I want to know what I'm reading for. Yeah, she's fantastic. They're wonderful people. I love those people. They're great. I consider them friends, even though we don't behave at all like friends do. Like me and Rachel and Dave and Natalie behaved like friends do. I called up Dave, you want to go get some dinner? Yeah, that'd be great. We haven't seen each other in a long time. Let's go get some dinner. He said, let's go to Tui's. We went to Tui's is still in business? Yeah, they moved to Faro. Oh, let's go. That's how friends be. We don't act like that, but I still consider them friends because I've just been so intimately involved in lots of things. I've been in the house a lot of times, you know. One time when Jeffrey was having problems with his computer keyboard business, they called me over there to help troubleshoot that thing. Just sort of like as a friend, you know. I don't think they paid me for that, but that's what I mean by like. Probably how the conversation went was they called me. You got any thoughts? I said, let me just come over there. I'll just take a look at it. I'll bring my Dremel tool or something. And that is in fact what ended up happening. And we did come up with a solution for it. But yeah, different kind of friends. Different kind of friends. You know, my relationship with them is foremost professional, but also there's not a lot of personal resonance among us because I'm the dad's supervisor. And the mom's my benefactor type. So she and I are never going to see eye to eye. You know? But it's because we have this shared, honest, good-willed, wanting the best for her kids. It allows us to have these really interesting, kind of sometimes intense, intimate interactions that are, I guess, unique to the field of education. And they're unique to the field of actually clients hiring you to educate people, not to my kids in your class at school or something. You do get good teachers sometimes, and you're grateful when you do as a parent, but can an ENTP be friends with other ENTPs? Not really. I mean, we can. I could be friends with Club ENTP in the sense that I could go visit him and we could have the shared positive experience of him getting to show me around and me getting to make videos and us both getting to mutually build up each other's NE to FE together for a brief period of time. And we'd probably call each other friends after that, but we both would fundamentally know about the relationship. Yeah, but I'm busy doing my things my way over here, and I got my shit going on, and I don't want necessarily to have this other creative voice either dictating what we're doing when we're hanging out as a general rule, or I mean, I imagine a couple of ENTPs who were working together on a shared project that it was required so much talking that it required two ENTPs. They might get along okay, but there's been an awful lot of competition for audio space, it seems like. And the interesting thing is, I'm actually pretty good about managing my own talkativeness with actual people in the world. I'm pretty good about listening and asking questions and stuff. But sometimes I slip into like reflexive wanting to explain too much and shit, you know. Which type can get along best with ENTP? ISFJs, INFJs are the two types that get along best with ENTPs. It's really easy for Dave and I to get along and to feel a friendship, to understand our friendship both through SI gives it a kind of, like, there's extra juice from all that history together that we both feel equivalently. Whereas with INFJs are not nostalgic. You're not going to sit around and share stories about the past. But the thing is, so for the amount of time that now granted, Dave and I are also great at doing stuff together, like playing a show together or something like that, or going to a party together or something. But over the long haul, if you were in a, say, intimate romantic relationship, I think INFJ has better long-term compatibility. I increasingly feel just so deeply compatible with Rachel. It's crazy. It's been a very slow reality to sort of evolve, and also me see it and understand it. Because as a couple of FE people, Rachel and I are both, I think, accustomed to not getting past part one. Part one is, okay, I need you, my partner, to not be these things. And we never get past that. Now here we are, we're finding the fact that, wait, but, oh, okay, wait. I need you to not be these things, and you're actually not any of those things. How is that possible? Okay, so you're great, you're fine, you're perfect. You don't have any of the red check marks that eliminate you from being okay. Great, so that means I love you, I guess. And that we are great. Both FE types, she and I both, are gonna approach it like that. So what happens when there aren't any problems that are continually making you go through this before part? Well, then you realize, oh, you know what? I actually love this person. Like, it's not just that there's nothing wrong with her that eliminates her from acceptable. It's that there's things that are right about her that I like, I am fond of, and she's got, there's a lot about her specifically that's good. It's not just that she's not bad, you know? that's like an FE person, once they realize that somebody's not an FI problem. Because it's like, if you basically think that I'm a team player, people who have feeling related issues are being selfish and spoiled, then your frame of reference is, look, you don't be a problem, I won't be a problem, we're cool, you know? But FI isn't like that, and a romantic long-term relationship is certainly the appropriate context for FI. So I feel like I'll continue to understand that half of my positive feelings for Rachel, just ever little bit by little bit more and more and more, you know? She's getting more comfortable being her in this relationship. She's feeling more empowered. It's great to see. You know, it's like, she's delightful. In ancient Greece, they did it to pay tribute to the goddess Artemis. They made a round cake to represent the shape of the moon, and added candles to represent the moonlight. No. The moon's not spiky. You can't represent light with spiky things. You can't represent light with something that generates light. That's not representing it. That's just actually illuminating it. You've got to represent light with something symbolic of light that's not light. Something like a turtle. When a lobster that has just lost a battle is exposed to serotonin, it will stretch itself out, advance even on former victors, and fight longer and harder. Drugs prescribed to depressed human beings, which are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, have much the same chemical and behavior effect. It's one of the more staggering demonstrations of evolutionary continuity. Why you gotta bring evolution into this thing? Why haven't Earth Prozac even cheers of lobsters? But that's not the same thing at all. So, being overconfident in your fighting abilities is not something that serotonin does to human beings. Being appropriately wary about challenging a lobster that just defeated you is not a sign of depression, it's a sign of common sense. It sounds like Prozac does the opposite thing in lobsters than it does in people. Rachel doesn't become more fighty when she takes Prozac, she becomes not fighty. I agree with you, Boba Fett. I agree with you there. I trust his FI. I trust him to be well-intentioned and doing the best he can. And I get that me sniping at things he says here is shooting a fish in a barrel in a way that's kind of unfair to him, because you got to evaluate that he's not making statements in a vacuum. He's making statements to an audience with certain frames of reference that he understands is not necessarily going to make explicit his own understanding of those frames and what's motivating the way he's saying things. But, you know, I'm cheap and easy like that. What can I say? I'm a cheap date. Just let me go to the shooting range and club some baby seals and I'll be fine. Lobsters help to explain human hierarchies. I mean, the fact that the same chemical did have the same behavioral effect. In other words, even if there were chemicals that predictably acted upon all brains of any sort rather than just human brains, that would not link any way at all to evolutionary continuity of life on Earth. That does not establish that at all, doesn't link to it at all. The idea of evolution is that there's a differentiation from commonality. Not that there's a retention of shared ancestral traits or something. Now, sure, evolutionary scientists have pushed those two things together. That's just bad thinking, you know. Now, granted, it is true that we have a lot of reason to think that genes are persistent. But that's not a good reason to think evolution happens. That's a bad reason to think evolution. That's a good reason to think evolution doesn't happen. While lower levels of serotonin are associated with decreased levels of aggression in vertebrates like the lobster, the opposite is true in humans. I think you got that backwards, Winston Baum, but this happens because low levels of serotonin in the brain make communication between the amygdala and the frontal lobes weaker, making it more difficult to control emotional responses to anger. Check how pride of lions operate. Very observable. What am I going to learn from that? Watching the lions, that is to say. Well, I mean, sure, there are a multiplicity of different social arrangements that species attain in the world. And we can find ones that share certain commonalities with certain human social relationships. Our last common ancestor with the lobster was an animal that existed 350 million years ago. And it was the first and only animal in history to develop during the course of its life an intestine. Didn't have one when it was born, didn't need one when it was born, but developed one. Oh wait, no. We're not talking about actual animals here. We're talking about this make-believe thing called a species that somehow changes without any actual individuals ever changing. Right. It's like saving water. I made this great observation today, and I think it's a fantastic observation, and everybody in whoever hears anything in the world needs to hear this and understand what I'm saying, okay? The world has become so metaphorical that literally the state of California has public information campaigns telling people to save water. Millions of people read these campaigns, believe they understand what is meant by save water, and everybody but me is wrong. So, of course, if Californians were to follow the advice to save water, we'd put a cistern up to collect and save water. That's what saving water means. Instead, everybody thinks saving water means using less water. This is what's wrong with the world. Because somebody wants people to use less water, they're going to abuse language to make it sound like something other than what it is, and that's going to continue so long and so hard that everybody completely forgets what the word save means. Isn't that fucking crazy? Isn't that insane? Does this not blow everybody's fucking mind? This is what's wrong with the world. So, what's wrong with the world is people say things like, this animal that existed 350 million years ago was the first animal to develop an intestine. Because either they don't know what the word animal means, or they don't know what the word develop means. And that's what's wrong with the world. That's why evolution can get away with this bullshit. People have so much mistaken metaphor for literal because of the way people abuse language that have the entire state of California think that saving water means use less water. Okay. So, same thing with this lobster thing that develops an intestine. I mean, that's just as nonsensical as saying the Hagglepop Dondeltang the Journal. It means nothing. It doesn't mean anything. But people think it does. Because they don't require there to be an actual agent to take any kind of action. They're perfectly comfortable with reifying this make-believe thing called a species, which is really comprises just a bunch of individuals all having the same genome and producing offspring that have the same genome. Metaphor. It poisons people's minds if they aren't TI enough. And that's Eric's rant against metaphors. I got my own lobster meme. See, because really, my whole anti-evolution thing, it's time for me to come clean. I'm projecting an insecurity here. I actually, myself, personally, began life as a lobster. And slowly, I worked my way towards the edge of the sea, periodically darting in and out of the ocean, until gradually I became more accustomed to the air, and then I evolved lungs, and for a while I was a lung-having lobster on the land, and then after that my little legs fused into two in the front and two in the back, and I sort of gradually stretched out. And I needed to do this as I was walking down the beach collecting clams and stuff. It was evolutionarily advantageous for me to collect more clams, so my legs grew longer so I could make longer strides, because the clams were spaced far apart. Eventually I got tired of eating just clams, so I evolved a regular stomach instead of a lobster stomach. And first I evolved actually a cow's stomach, because I went through a brief cud chewing phase, but then I went to human. And I've been human ever since. It was the longest 3 days of my life. I evolved fast. It's pure. It's punctuated equilibrium is what it's called. You see, I suffer from an evolutionary disease called punctuated equilibrium, where occasionally I evolve super fast for no reason, and then I'll abruptly stop. And that's what happened to me when I was born. That was right after well, it was before I jumped over the Grand Canyon on a horse. But after I was conceived. There's between those 2 dates. Somewhere between conception and the day after my birth, when I jumped over the Grand Canyon on a horse. Please do visit my Facebook page so you too can see the many exciting life events that comprise my life before the internet. You'd be amazed at some of the things I've done. For example, I invented the French language. True story. You can see it on my Facebook page. I think it was like 76 or something. I discovered the moon. I invented the high five. Oh, I brought down the Berlin Wall. I'm the first person to ever banter playfully, prior to which it had only been serious banter. I also forsook the pie one time. No, I forewent the pie. I'm sorry. I forewent the pie. Somebody offered me pie. I said, I'm going to forego it this time. The four most overrated things in life are champagne, lobster, anal sex, and picnic. Anal sex and picnics. Okay. The four most overrated things in life are champagne, caviar, anal sex, and picnics. I don't think picnics are that overrated. Are picnics really that overrated? Who's really rating picnics so highly? I get people who are rating champagne too highly. Lobster's pretty good. I don't like really anything that swims or lives in the water to eat it, but lobster's pretty damn good as those things go. But I agree, it's still overrated. And definitely anal sex is overrated. I mean, even a C- would be overrated because there's poop involved, and that's gross. Picnics, though, I don't really hear a lot of people expressing high ratings of picnics. We need lobster to explain structures in society because lobsters act like Jordan Peterson thinks real men should act. He thinks when you give a man serotonin and stop him being depressed, he's going to attack the shit out of that guy. You know, like, and in the Western tradition, the male has the role of overcoming defeat and getting back on that horse to fight the bigger lobster again. That's how you know you're not sissified. When your culture's lobster-like. You know, I really think we need to focus more on the 512 subcultures of lobsters. Because, like, blast and play lobsters are a lot different than consume sleeve lobsters. But sometimes they could be jumper switch. Green screen smoke. This green screen has promised me it's going to quit smoking so many times already. Oh, let's not shit on JP too much. I agree that JP sort of allowed himself to become co-opted too much by the He-Man Woman Hater Club guys. I prefer to call them that rather than incels. What do you mean, He-Man Woman Hater Clubs? It's the best name for MGTOW, right? Oh, I'm in MGTOW. Oh, you mean the He-Man Woman Haters Club? There's so little rascals of you. I'm pretty sure that's not going to work out for you, buddy. You're in an organization saying, hey, I don't really want this. We're all in agreement. We don't want this. You don't want it, right? No, I'm fine without that thing. None of us want that, right? This is a we don't want that club. Are you sure you guys don't want that? Because you sure do talk about how you don't want that so much. You know, it's like, yeah, it's fine. Look, just sort of checking out of the reproductive game is not the same thing as making a lifestyle or ideology out of it. I mean, maybe there are a population of people who need to be reassured that it's fine for them to be single. But if it were really that, then it would include both men and women. You know? It doesn't end up playing out like that. It doesn't play out as guys who help reassure each other that it's cool to be single. You're okay. You know, you don't need to date, and you're still a man or something like that, right? It doesn't play out like that at all. It plays out as guys complaining about how they got fucked over by women, and there's this whole genre of videos on YouTube that I occasionally stumble into some sort of related recommended feed, and it'll start popping up my recommended. There's like videos basically showing women being stereotypically like irrational or unfair or something in ways to make the woman look bad, like she got schooled kind of thing. There's obviously this population of guys out there who feel this sense of when they see these videos saying chicks are shitty. It's such a sour grapes thing, right? I don't have any of that, so I'm gonna sit around watching videos about how it's shitty. Ew, that's stupid. I don't like that. That's really dumb. No, I agree with you, Real Klaus, that he basically got co-opted by those movements because he likes to frame human behavior through universalist understandings of group dynamics, and he's self-identified and linked his whole professional career to being an evolutionary psychologist. Unfortunately, he's hitched his cart to a horse made out of poo. sometimes think about making little videos about this or that or the other thing, that I see. But I try to avoid shit that makes me mad or makes me want to explain what's wrong with it. I tend to, as I've indicated before, I'm sensitive to trash on my table, which is to say, I can't help but kind of police analysis. And when I hear bad analysis, it makes me mad and I say things about it, right? But I also remember channels like that horrible channel that used to be before YouTube changed, had this sort of sea change. It was called, I can't even remember what it was called now, but he basically made videos where he said he'd find clips of like feminists saying stupid ass things and then insult them and say how stupid they were and TI shame them, And it's like, I get that there's some juiciness there, but I don't like that. I don't like that kind of calorie, It's... Well, I mean, nowadays I can't exactly do it without... I can't fairly do it without acknowledging the determinate frame on the matter, which is, okay, this is a function disconnect here. But yeah, feminist SJW pwned number 41, like that, yeah. Well, the thing is, C.J. O'Connell says the current state of discourse has devolved so pathetically. I don't know if it was really... I don't think it's exactly devolved. I think that it's become vastly more inclusive of people whose opinion about public policy things doesn't matter at all and shouldn't really be heard. It's not like I'm saying it should be suppressed or anything. It's like, people who have truth as instrumental, they're looking for the truths they're looking for. With all possible truths being voiced, they'll find the truths they're looking for, and they'll use them as they see fit to validate what they already think. And that's just what it means to have instrumental NI or instrumental TI or both. Instrumental TI is not operational anyway. So one of the advantages of an incomplete metaphysical ecosystem was this gatekeeper effect. It did turn out to be something of an advantage in that, well, it kept everybody's narratives cleaner, and so regardless of what the truth was, the form of operation was narratively a lot less complex. So now it's a lot more complex, and it's a lot more complex not just because of the inclusiveness, but because that inclusiveness has both exposed weaknesses in people's epistemologies. In other words, people are very credulous, gullible, or willing to believe what they want to believe or whatever. But it's also exposed the inadequacy of the dominant narratives that preceded it. So most of that, there's shit ton of stuff you just go like, well, this is just nonsense bullshit. But there's also a good amount of stuff that you go, hey, you know what? It turned out that stuff we used to say was nonsense bullshit. It turned out to be quite true. So that's what makes it so complex, is that you have plenty of examples of both. And it is true that the gate kept dominant paradigm shit that used to exist was inadequate. And it's also true that the haphazard chaos of full inclusiveness in the or completing the metaphysical ecosystem, basically, which is what the internet has become, that has it's not just made it more difficult for the truth to become the predominant narrative, it's made it more difficult to figure out what the truth is. And that's a much bigger issue. Like that's where the genuine excitement about being alive right now comes from, is that there's this sense of extra reality that is now plausible in everybody's mind. The table's been set for it with all this stuff about quantum shit, you know. Quantum shit is not really understood by people very well, by the average person, but even the average person increasingly has some, you know, beginner level concept of something about it, right? And that it introduces a magical element via science into most people's worldviews, because it's hard for most people to interpret it in any kind of non-magical way, and yet people tend to afford it a lot of legitimacy because it comes from science. Okay. In-cell inkwell common subsets include bald cells, curry cell, clown cell. What's a clown cell? Why are they? Is it somebody who's actually a clown who also doesn't have a girlfriend? Height pill. Femoid, void demeaning, term referring to women as less than human. Oh, I see. So, femoid or void is a demeaning term referring to women as less than human. So that's something that incels use. So, height pill, subset of black pill, which suggests women are primarily drawn to tall men. So it's like, I'm not getting laid because of this structural unfairness that makes women who are fundamentally slaves to their being reproducers, makes them unable, because they're not fully human and can't really choose, makes them unable to recognize or value me as a man. It's just like, okay, so let me get this straight. You're insecure about Mia, and what's all this extra philosophy shit you're saying here? This extra like worldview stuff? I get the first part. You're insecure about Mia. Now, what's the rest of it about? I think the rest of it's just sort of toppings and garnishes. You know. Juggernaut law. The theory that you can't stop a woman's dating potential. Unattractive and flawed women make men feel like they have a chance, so they will still have their pick of men. So, in Juggernaut law, is the notion here that the problem is that women aren't ashamed of themselves enough? That women don't have enough body issues? Is that basically what's going on here? You know what? I cannot believe it. It is so unfair. I'm not getting laid, and that fat girl is. Fucking women. They're so horrible. What? It is easier for women to get laid, but that doesn't make them less insecure than men. That is not the case. Women are more insecure than men, to be perfectly honest. It's one of the few kind of groupest statements I will say is women are generally more insecure than men. And insecure men need to remember that. You think you're insecure, she's more insecure than you are. She's a girl. Well, it's... Men are afforded, or much less trapped by their appearance than women are, ultimately. Now, it may be true that thanks, Michael Smith. I do have so many videos. It's because there were too many chupacabras in this pueblo. I had to replace them with videos. Anyway, what's about? Oh yeah, chicks being more insecure because like men can be broadly perceived as attractive to the opposite sex by being successful, confident, lots of things besides just physically attractive. By and large, women are reduced to you can be attractive by being hot or by being not a problem at all. You know, the hot crazy spectrum, right? Like if she's super hot, she's also super crazy. So girls have amounts of hotness and problem causingness. It's so silly. It's not even worth talking about, really. It's so silly. That does sound intermittently awful. That sounds horrible. I don't want to hear it. Here's something. That's the amazing thing about being a woman. You have something everyone wants. I mean, almost nobody ever thinks that. Women don't think, this is great. I always get some guy to fuck me. If that is the case and they're down with that, then they project that as the norm for everybody, even though it's not. And they don't want to hear you whining about it. That's for sure. Yeah, well, whatever ball of yarn was rolling down the hill, I guess it's now, the yarn is no longer a ball, it's just a piece of string now. It's done being unraveled, is the point. Whatever I was saying, that ball of yarn ran out of yarn, I guess. Oh, I do a poll. I did a poll today, Boba Fett. Or maybe it was yesterday. And it asked the important question. I know you are, but A, why are you? B, what is this? C, how are those? Or D, what am I? A lot of them are works of art, and it's hard not to drool. I mean, I don't see girls getting drooled over, really. I don't know what world everybody's living in. Everywhere I go, I see a bunch of random people doing random shit, and occupied in their business, and not being, you know, a woman who's like, yeah, I'll be right with you, John. Rich, powerful man. Oh no, my vagina's going towards him. John, I have to leave you. There's somebody better over here. That's not happening. And when it does happen, it's like, yeah, fucked up shit happens in lots of different ways. Guys do fucked up shit to girls too. Women are great, don't get me wrong. I like women, okay? But I hope to spend most of my time not manifesting my sexual self. Which means most of the time, I don't really want to be distracted. Like, certain animes, I can't watch one that's got too much fucking fan service in it. It's distracting. I don't want to mix my arousal with anything else, right? Like, I don't want there to be, like, girls behind the newscaster on a green screen while he's reading the news about Ukraine. I don't want those things mixed together. I don't even like kissing scenes in the TV shows. Like, Rachel and I just finished watching Between. I don't know if you've watched this. It's absolutely fucking ridiculous show. But fun, super. I enjoyed the shit out of it, but it's completely ridiculous. Like, oh my god, that kid got hit by a car. Oh my god, now a tiger got loose in their backyard. Oh my god, now the tiger turned out to be a bear. Oh my god, now that guy is actually that guy's sister. Oh my god. It's just like that the whole time. But anyway, it was a funny show. It wasn't intended to be funny. It was a fun show. Rachel and I had a lot of laughs about it because it had all these kind of ridiculous plot things. Like, oh, I know what made Rachel laugh so hard earlier today. Like, this girl, the main character girl, this is the first thing that happens in this show. She's got her baby. She's supposedly 18 and in her senior year in high school, but she's super pregnant. She has her baby. It turns out later on you find out it was the baby that she was impregnated by her boss at the car dealership, who's Chuck's dad. Anyway, the baby, now suddenly you find out, hey, there's a family of Mennonites living in this community for some reason. So it's like, the community is called Lake Pretty, right? Well, but conveniently, we learn at some point that there's this heretofore unknown Mennonite family that lives nearby. that we find out about them because one of the women from this Mennonite family, the wife, goes over to this other farmer's house, abruptly out of nowhere shows up, and he invites her for dinner, and then they kiss, and then her husband shows up the next day. And how they met? Supposedly, she got bucked from her horse. Anyway, so the main character, she's taken her baby to the Mennonite family because they're the only ones who have enough food left to feed this baby, supposedly, even though everybody else in town who had food has been attacked by people and have their food stolen. For some reason, nobody has ever gone to the Mennonites to take their food, even though the Mennonites don't have any weapons and everybody else does. So she brings it to the Mennonites who still have all of their stuff while everybody else is on just like starvation rations. And then she says, "Take my baby, Mennonites." And then the Mennonite guy goes, "I told you never to come back here," because she had shown up with the other guy who had kissed his wife, who got bucked from a horse and decided to kiss another man at dinner and disappear. Anyway, so she gets back from she gets back from giving the Mennonites her baby to the hospital, where like a couple of scenes before, she and the other guys there had restrained, tied up Liam, the doctor. And she walks in and she goes, "What's this?" And she unties him. And I think I'm like, wait, why is she untying him? Because does this have something to do with her giving the baby to the Mennonites? And neither version can make any sense of it at all. So why he suddenly came in and said, "What's all this then?" and untied this guy. And they just spent all this time tying up. And, it's kind of a crazy show. It's got funny things like there's this one set they've got in it where it's supposed to show how the community now is all the adults are dead. It's just kids under 22 years old who are still there. And it's become this wild kind of Lord of the Fliesy thing. But there's this street scene where they keep cutting to it back and forth, like presumably it's a couple weeks later, and it's the street, but it's got a bunch of like positioned pieces of trash and stuff around, and, like burning fire, and then kids riding around on a bicycle or whatever. And there's this one trash can that keeps staying in the middle of the street. Like, this trash can must have stayed in the middle of that street for weeks. I don't know why nobody thought to move that trash can out of the way. I don't know how many children I saw bicycle around that trash can when somebody should have moved it. It was right in the middle of the road. I guess children can't be trusted to move things. Anyway, it's like, for example, for the whole show, Adam, the main sort of male character, he's finishing his senior year in high school. He's living with his mom here in Pretty Lake, and his dad disappeared a long time ago. Never met his dad or whatever. No really mention of his dad, except occasionally mention that he's just saying just has his mom, and mom died, and it was just me and mom, and now she's dead, and blah blah blah. And then out of the blue, Adam's like trying to look for ways out or something of this quarantine zone, and this guy, I remember, he's in the prison trying to look up these records, and this gray-haired man, first the security guard comes, and the security guard is gonna shoot Adam, and then this gray-haired man shoots the security guard dead, and Adam looks at the man, and then the man goes like, punch, punches the Adam into the back of the cabinet, and then Adam looks dazed and says, "Dad?" Yeah, it's his dad, of course. It turns out his dad, how did he know? He didn't know it was his dad until his dad punched him, and his head hit the cabinet, and he was dazed. But I guess he must have somehow recognized that punch from his subconscious or something. How did he know it was his dad? It didn't look anything like him, but he knew somehow. Keeping in mind, the security guard was working for his dad. And his dad claims to Adam that he's come to save Adam. And Adam needs to get out of there because Adam's the only one who's immune, and he's the only one who can safely integrate into the rest of the world without putting the world's population at risk. And Adam catches him in a lie at some point and determines his dad's a bad person and kills him. So, first, Adam's dad gets a security guard to go catch Adam, but when the security guard's about to shoot Adam, the dad shoots the security guard, and then Adam kills the dad later because the dad was a bad guy, it turns out. People are also constantly dying by accident, too. Crazy accidents happen in this place. Since the quarantine broke out, there were 2 children that were run over by cars. One of them was a Down syndrome girl who's Chuck's little sister, and boy, Chuck was so mad, and he thought Ronnie had done it. But it wasn't Ronnie. No. He was always trying to blame Ronnie for everything. Because Ronnie was from the family on the bad side of the tracks, you know. If you're lucky there, Michael Smith, okay? If you love the shit out of your EHP son, then yes, he may be just like this. I am an EHP who had excellent parents who loved him and enabled and empowered him in his ways. Hey, listen, I've not always been the fuck up you see before you today, okay, Michael Smith? I've not always been that. I've had high achieving periods in my life too. So don't think I'm just a big YouTube fuck up. I have had other parts of my life. I had a family where I raised a daughter all the way from birth. Before birth, I fathered it with my penis first. I conceived it with my semen. And then I raised it all the way from birth to adulthood. I still know it, in fact. It's my daughter, Delilah. So that's pretty important. McGregor rules. What are McGregor rules? Oh, it's okay, lady. The only reason it would make your heart hurt is because you think it's representative of some pain within me. I don't really have any pain within me about it. Okay, well, listen. It's more like I sent a sperm as my agent to represent me on behalf of me in the case of me versus the ovum. It's more like the sperm is my lawyer. And I hired a whole team and said, may the best lawyer talk his way into that ovum. Oh, Michael Smith. Well, it depends what you mean by I'm not showing him much love and support. One could successfully argue, although it would be reductive and not really true, that my dad didn't show me much overt love. Like he's pretty cold and not mushy at all. But I always knew I was protected, safe, cared for, stuff like that. And it is here, on the shores of these fallopian tubes, that the sperm begins its arduous journey upstream towards the glowing orb of future possibility. Now look, what have we here? The soft, moist flesh of the uterine wall. It is here later, where the fertilized ovum will implant itself, eager to find a nesting perch where it may grow into adulthood. I mean, I suspect your son got something very worthwhile in that you can't help but convey to him, whether you wanted to or not, that you value his dominant function if you're an INFJ. And that's possibly just as powerful as the kind of love and support that I got. Because I did not receive that from my father, certainly. I never received this message that the way you are, Eric, is good. The message I always received was, ay. Can you do nothing right? Are you really my son? Are you this bad at this sport too, and this bad at this? And it's like there's no avoiding that. That's basically, benefactors don't respect beneficiary types. They don't respect their beneficiaries very much. It's unavoidable because it's because of the fact that you get the most, as a third party, you get the most value out of an individual when you find their fifth slot very valuable. But when it's polar, even though it's an absolute value, it's not something that extends to other people like that. Trouble, it wasn't very long ago that I fed you, was it? What? What do you want? You want more food? Okay, why not? You didn't want food. Why are you so hungry? What do I look like, a cat grocery store? I guess I do. It's a good look on me. I make a cat grocery store to look like haute couture. And if you're not familiar with your degrees of couture, haute is the best, apparently. I don't remember exactly what time the sprinklers come on. And on some occasions in the past, I put the food of him down there on the ground instead of up here on the deck. And on a couple of occasions, then the sprinkler came on like right after I gave him his food. So it both drove him away and made his food wet. So now I feel like, okay, if it's in the middle of the night, I should probably put it up here on the deck. Because otherwise, that's just wasting cat food and not feeding the cat. Well, I mean, Michael Smith, he's 13. 13 is kind of annoying. No matter what form it comes in. Let me tell you that. I've been stuck there for years, and I'm still kind of annoying. The thing is, it doesn't have to play out like that. Jeffrey's an ENTP who's a 3, and he's, I don't know if it's like his family basically, they just, nobody's allowed to not be putting the handle on shit in that family, you know? And as a consequence, now granted, his mom calls and complains to me all the time about having to do all this sort of organizational maintenance shit on his behalf, or just know and watch it happen that he fucking, once again, fucks up something that was going perfectly fine because he lost Mia Mia and forgot about Mia. Well, Michael Smith, I want you to remember my name. My name is my name now. It could have been my name forever. My name is Baby Pig Poop Face. And the reason for this is because I'm a baby, I'm a pig, and I'm a poop face. And I probably always will be. Maybe your son is a baby pig poop face. Maybe. You thought about that? Tell him, you know what, dude, you go ahead and be a baby as best you can, but be aware that probably the world's not going to let you be a baby that much. I'll try not to get too annoyed by it. Go ahead and be a pig. Just indulge yourself with what you want to indulge yourself with. And try not to be such a poop face, though. And I think that's a fair deal you can bring to him, you know? Because I try not to be such a poop face sometimes. It's hard when people are wrong. What type was or is my dad? My dad is an ESTJ. Rather, you're not super far off if you think Red from that 70s show. That's kind of like my dad. He's very red. He kind of talks like Red. Remember that show? And when I saw that show, I thought, I didn't really actually think at the time, oh, that's my dad. I thought, oh, that's such a stereotypical dad character. Yeah. What happens when he first misses the bus? Well, the reason all this stuff happens, Michael Smith, in part, is because there's not enough mapping being done. Like, you could sit down with your kid and say, okay, why are you going to school? Or do you want to go to school? Why do you think you're going to school? Here's why I think you're going to school. Here's why I think you should. Do you think you should? Would you like to try not going to school? What do you think the deficits of that would be? Like, you need to really engage him about the topic. There's no reason to catch the bus if he has no reason why he's getting on the bus in the first place. There's no reason to know why he even leaves the house after breakfast. He knows where he's going. Why did I leave the house? I'm going to school. That does not answer the question, why did I leave the house? That answers the question, where am I going? Well, that's because everybody's focused on the wrong problem, right? Everybody's focused on the problem of whether or not he got on the bus. Nobody's focusing on the actual question, why did he leave the house to get on the bus? Why? You know, if this were a naturally occurring world, someone would say, what do you mean there's a problem here? It sounds like he didn't want to get on the bus, so he didn't get on the bus. I mean, you don't have to get on the bus if you don't want to get on the bus, right? Maybe he wasn't going there. Except we've had this really unnatural world where it's okay that children have to be forced to go someplace and be put under the authority of arbitrary succession of adults without any explanation. Some people, oh, it's after school, it's the bus to get home. Oh. Well, I still ask the same question. Why did he get on the bus to leave the house in the first place? Then if he didn't get on the bus in the first place, we wouldn't have this problem getting back on the bus at the end of the day. In other words, if he really wanted to get on that bus, he would have. But that wasn't interesting to him. Making sure he attended to transportation matters wasn't interesting at all. So he probably spaced out and missed the bus or something. Or, he's like, okay, well, I don't want to wait here. What I really want to have happen here is probably what your son said, okay? What I really want to have happen here is for the bus to wait, everybody else be on board, and then all show up at the last second, hop on, and get on the bus. Because I don't want to wait for the bus. I'll go over there and do this thing that I feel like doing. Or I'll go play with this guy over there, or something. I don't like waiting for the bus. So he was probably off doing his thing, thinking, I'm going to time this right, I don't want to wait for the bus. The bus can wait for me, motherfuckers. Except the bus didn't wait for him. And he probably thought about that. Well, that's why buses suck ass. I wish I weren't here having to wait for this bus. I wish I hadn't gotten on that bus this morning. That was dumb of me. If I hadn't gotten on that first bus, I wouldn't have had this second bus problem. What is this place anyway that I'm at? What are they doing to me here? What are these books they keep giving me? What do you want me to read this shit? Looks boring to me. It's not a book I would choose. I don't think I would choose that book to read. You seem to think it's important I read it, but you've given me no explanation as to why. Well, yeah, the baby on the bus goes wah, 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 all the way home. From the mouths of babe come the terrible cries of truth. That's right, baby pig poop face. Just because I'm a baby and a pig and a poop face doesn't mean I'm wrong. That's what, it's like I wish everybody would treat their parent-teacher conferences this way as well. When you go to the parent-teacher conference, instead of letting the teacher tell you things about your kid, you should ask the teacher questions like, so, why is my kid spending an hour a day with you? You're doing what? You're the history teacher, meaning what? What are you teaching them exactly? History? The history of what? I don't remember requesting any history lessons. Did my kid want to ask you to teach him about this stuff? No? Oh, well, why isn't he in a class that he wanted? What do you mean he doesn't get to choose? That seems strange. So, it doesn't matter whether history is interesting or relevant or anything to him. Even if there was something he did want to learn about, he couldn't choose that. You have to learn this instead. Who chooses these things? Is it you? Do you get to decide which kids have to take what? Oh no, it's not you. It's the principal or something. Oh, okay. So what happens when he gets bored? I couldn't believe it when he told me this, but he claims, I'm sure it's bullshit. I know he must be lying, but he claims that when he's bored, he can't just get up and leave and come back home. Is that true? What, you guys have him like locked in here or something? Like you're a prisoner? He can't leave because he feels bored? That's not a good enough reason for him to leave? But what if you're boring? Because you do seem like a pretty boring teacher. Okay, well, does he want to go to this school? Or does he not want to go to school? Has anybody asked him that question? Maybe he doesn't like school. School is stupid. It's a dumb, dumb place. It's prison youth camp. And it's there. Smart people should never be put in the hands of dumb people to educate them. That doesn't work. The only thing that these smart people learn is that education is stupid. Thanks, Aga. I am looking good. You know why? Haircut, y'all. I cut these hairs with my bare fingers. I am going to be wrapping this up pretty quick here, CJ. If you do want to stream, you know, at like at what's that, 1:42, like at 2 a.m. or something, we can plan to segue or something like that. You know. You don't think he should be able to pick the school? I'm not saying he should be able to pick the school. I'm saying he should be able to pick no school. I don't think you're going to find a good school because the whole concept is rotten to the core. Forcing children to go to a room someplace where somebody teaches them, which involves a whole shit ton of their own frame projection in their little fiefdoms. Either they teach them in their own little fiefdoms and it's just you don't know what you're going to get, or they are constrained by some sort of standardized protocol to be unable to meaningfully teach anything. At least in certain subjects. Like, if you actually try to follow the California core curriculum, you would spend... it would be like this. Okay, here's a worksheet that says... here's a piece of paper that says all of your... verb conjugations and all of your in all the tenses and in progressive voice and in intensive voice. I mean in passive voice and active voice and in progressive and intensive forms. Here's all the conjugations. Now, I don't really have time for you guys to practice this or anything, or me to teach about it at all, because according to the California core curriculum, I've got to cover 80 of these concepts that each will take weeks to genuinely install into a kid. And there's no possible way to meaningfully teach it. It's like, I know what we'll do. We'll come up with a core curriculum, the principle behind which is teachers pass out lists of things that students have to learn on their own, because there's no way the teacher can teach the shit. Not and cover that much material. Well, the thing is, the opposite of force is not coddle. There is coddling can be done, but failing to force somebody is not coddling them. It's respecting them. And one of the big problems that most parents have with their children is if they have problems, is that they don't respect their children enough. I'm not worried. I just thought, hey, we can kill two birds with one stone or something, you know. Because I am running out of gas. I took Avaclani. I need a good night's sleep. I'm not sure where I probably got. Shit, I gotta go to bed because I got, let me look at my calendar. I got multiple things on my calendar for tomorrow. Okay, that's not too bad. The earliest one's 11:30. I got 3 things on my calendar tomorrow. 11:30, 1, and 2:30. That's not so bad, 11:30. I could get up. I could sleep a full night pretty much and still get up, you know. Yeah, sure. Michael Smith, rock on, bro. It was a very SE8 thing, too. I'm very counter SE. Like, but he is too, right? I had that video I made a little while ago called, like, how to make each of the types mad. How to make an ENTP mad. Tell them what to do. Tell them what they should do. He's just not typologically going to respond well to it. And the other thing that will never work is any kind of structured TE plan. Like, now, if you get good grades for this whole quarter, we're going to, ENTPs cannot operate on this kind of time frames. It will have no impact whatsoever. So, yeah. What I'm going to do, I'm going to put the cigarette out. I'm going to pull a couple of bowls. I'm going to try to pull like 3 good bowls. This weed's a little gacky. If weed is too flowery tasting and or doesn't burn just right, so you get kind of a slightly either too moist or not moist enough smoke, then it can be a little gacky. I got a haircut, so to speak, which is Rachel and I have a barbershop trimmer with those attachments and things. And I did Rachel's hair and mine. Rachel helped a little bit with mine. But I feel like I have more knowledge about hair than I would normally be expected to, because I did date a hairdresser for 2.5 years who had her salon in our house. So I've swept up a lot of hair. I've fixed her trimmer a lot of times. I did TE shit for her in her salon. So, I'm willing to talk to people about what they got to talk about. So I'm interested in asking her questions about hairdressing and stuff. So I feel like I got a pretty good understanding of my way around clippers. Not hair dressing or styling, no. Just barbershop thing I could do. What do I think about edibles? I only like them when I also have Adderall. If I eat edibles and I'm not on Adderall, they tend to make me what I'm talking about specifically are Delta 8 edibles. Forget about non-Delta 8 edibles. Non-Delta 8 edibles are overrated, for sure. Okay? But Delta 8 edibles are, it's surprising. The first time I heard about it, and the first time I tried it, I was assuming, oh, this is just going to be another one of those mostly bullshit things. Like, oh, this sativa is very cerebral and energy induced. It's weed, okay? It gets you sort of high. It's not any of those other things you're saying. Um, but the Delta 8 variant thing is definitely distinct. If you eat Delta 8 edibles, then you go, oh, whoa, these are a lot. It lasts longer, and it's a little weirder, and also, but if I don't have Adderall, it tends to make me just kind of like, I gotta go lie down. It's very difficult to dose correctly with edibles. You either eat a little bit too little and it does nothing, or you eat a little bit too much and you're like, I gotta go lie down. I'm like, oh, right now. You start getting a little headache maybe, and you realize, oh, that's what's going on. I'm like super freaking edible high. That's why I feel all like weird like this. Because you forget you eat them, you know. You forget you eat them, and then like an hour or two later, because the Delta 8s are slow to come on and they're long lasting. An hour or two later, you're like, what's wrong with me? What's going on? It's kind of funny. Well, Stan, the truth is marijuana probably isn't going to make you kill people. Pot makes you feel fine with being bored. And when you're bored, you should be learning some new skill. I mean, pot doesn't make me fine with being bored. What kind of weed are these people smoking? Yeah, I mean, marijuana is a mild psychedelic, if you're going to classify it as anything. But, it's more like kind of like a milder version of DMT. A super mild version of DMT. So much more mild that to even call it a version of it is doing a great disservice to DMT. Oh, DMT, I miss you. You made me so happily stupid. Remember those happy days when I had DMT and I was all dumb all the time? Those were good, happy times. Remember when I'd spend like 30 minutes talking about whether you understand something? When I spent DMT, I started talking like this. Okay, this is a little bit weird. Yeah, I feel this like sadness, like, oh, I wish I had drugs. I think it's all cartoony and weird, and pregnant with meaning and significance. See, that doesn't happen to me with DMT. I think everything gets funny. Like, everything gets stupid and funny, you know? Like, yeah, that word there. Yeah. Mushrooms has a similar effect on me, though. It's not like DMT's effect on me is that much different than mushrooms. I mean, DMT's is specifically DMT-ish. No, way different, dude. DMT and ecstasy are way different. DMT's in the same class of drugs as acid and mushrooms. Ecstasy is actually in the same class of drugs as meth, although we don't think of it like that. It actually gets pitched as a psychedelic, and it does have. Well, when you're on super strong ecstasy, I guess it sort of shares the ultra serotonin-y goodness of DMT, but it's via like amphetamine pathways, not via psychedelic pathways. So, it's actually a totally different class of drug. I will say that that's probably the best I've ever felt on drugs. It's one of two times. It's either the time I took really strong ecstasy, where I felt just like they say, like an angel, or it's the time that Rachel got serotonin poisoning at Corey's house, where I felt amazing, so happy, joyous, and just wonderful being on a lot of, smoking a lot of DMT and doing other drugs like whippets and microdosing acid, and it all just combined to this just glorious. Yeah, when I say ecstasy, I mean MDMA. When you buy ecstasy, you're very likely not to get MDMA, but it's supposed to be MDMA. Okay? That's the thing. I got and took ecstasy like 6 times. Only one time did I actually take ecstasy out of those 6 times. What's the difference between acid and shrooms? Shrooms are much preferable for a number of reasons. The most important reason why shrooms are preferable is because you can actually manage your dosage. Whereas with acid, it's like you can't technically overdose on acid, but one way to think of it is it's super easy to overdose on acid. Acid's less predictable. You don't know what exactly it's going to play out to be. It can be darker. It can be sheer joy, but it's more speedy regardless. Now, mushrooms, in contrast, personally, I cannot imagine having a bad trip on mushrooms without eating way too many. Knowingly eating way too many. I usually just eat half an eighth. But if there was some information given to me about the shrooms, like these are particularly strong, I'd probably just make sure I just eat half an eighth. If I didn't hear that, I might eat a little more, assuming they're not particularly strong. Or if they didn't look particularly strong. You can kind of tell by how much blue they got on them, And regardless, if I even if I go crazy and eat a full eighth, I'm fine. I'm an old head. That's not going to be a big deal. It'll wear off in 4 to 6 hours anyway. With acid, I've tripped for as long as like 20 hours before, and that was one of the bad trips. It was bad. Maybe 24 hours or something. Yeah, I find shrooms spiritually healthy in a way that I don't find acid. Like, when I take mushrooms, I'm going to be laughing the whole time. Everything's going to seem funny. And also, I'm going to continue to feel for days afterwards things like, I was carrying around a lot of. I guess I've been carrying around a lot of dread and anxiety or something lately, because I sure do feel liberated from that now. And that'll stick with me for a few days. If I could, I would do mushrooms once a week. Did I externalize my bad trip while you were on it, or suffer in relative silence? I've done both in different contexts. In the worst trip, I mostly suffered in silence. It was such a bad trip, like I didn't really feel like I could communicate. It was the trip where I sat in this girl's bed at college. Just someplace to sit. I barely knew the girl, But I was sitting on her bed because there was no chair or something. And I was alone in this room. And I was looking at this clock. And I was watching these, I think it was a digital clock. And I was watching it go from 6, 5:59. 6, 5:59. 6, 5. And I from all I could tell, this clock was definitely, literally advancing a minute and then retreating a minute. Advancing a minute and then retreating a minute. And I'm sitting there going, how long is this trip going to last? I'm looking at the clock, kind of freaked out, scared about my mental health. When you are tripping balls, if you are capable of some metacognition at all, and you have some capacity to reflect, you're going to be concerned about your mental health, because you're tripping balls, you're 6 hours in, and the end of it is nowhere in sight. You blacked out for 8 hours spontaneously? It's just, the thing about it is, after it's over as a reference point or a story, it's just this thing that happened one time. I mean, it's not like there were any huge takeaways for me. It's not like I ended that and said, now my perspective on the world has been poisoned by this bad trip. I remember after one bad trip being worried about my mental health for some stretch of time after it. It was the same one, actually. But, I felt like I knocked something loose in there, maybe. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I couldn't actually articulate Okay, I'll respond to it. I don't feel like it right now. But yeah, I'll respond to it, fine. I'm sure it's full of fucking garbage. It's like, I used to occasionally feel this sense of anxiety, like, oh shit, I wonder if they picked up on something that I've missed. I no longer feel that at all. I know what I'm gonna get. I'm gonna get arguments that aren't responsive to things I'm saying. I'm gonna get appeals to vagueness that don't reflect upon the contradictory specific claims that go along with them. I'm gonna get. I know what I'm gonna get. So it's like, I'll watch it. I'll respond to it. That's a good opportunity, actually. I appreciate them taking the risk. It was a terrible risk for them to take. Because since I'm going to sleep on it, especially, I'm definitely not doing it right now because I'm tired. I'm going to go to bed. But since I am giving a heads up about it, I'm going to sleep on it. It's going to come out way better. The longer I wait until I do it, as long as I don't wait too long and don't do it at all, the better it'll turn out. That's the key thing for me, is be slow with shit like this, because you got one chance to oh, was it they didn't make one? Oh, well, so much for that. Sounded interesting. On my bad trip, I thought I was being dragged down to hell, so I tried to go into a church and pray for God for mercy, but a priest saw me and slammed the door on me. It seemed to me like it was heaven's door and I was being shut out of heaven forever. Well, maybe you looked like a Jew. Just a joke, everybody. Just a joke. Okay. So, if that is in fact not the case that they made that video, then I'm not sure which part you said is a joke, you know. I have several friends who are therapists, and a couple were trying to get on advisory boards. Ooh, I want to be on an advisory board. Why? I just love being a part of a committee giving advice. It is so satisfying. But you didn't really experience it because you were blacked out the whole time because you did 625 mics? I don't think 625 mics is a solid, hearty dose, don't get me wrong. But I wouldn't imagine it causing and being sufficient to make you black out for 8 hours. It's not a epic dose. It's more than I want to take, but it's still not like stupid lots. Alright, I'm going to bed, everybody. So, but I want clarification before I go to bed. Oh, I see. So you trip for several days. Oh, it's a serious dose, I know. But I'm surprised it lasted several days. You know, 250 mic is right where you want. That's not quite 3 times that. It's a lot, but it's not idiot dose. I'm surprised you tripped that long. If you were accurate about the micrograms, it could have been more. That's the other problem. That's the thing with acid. No matter what somebody tells you or what you think you've determined for whatever reasons, when you put that little piece of paper on your tongue, you are playing mental health roulette because you don't know what you got coming until it happens. You live in Chechnya. On my friend's first time, he did 301 tab an hour after the first. So he did 600. Or did he do two 150s? See, that's what you never want to do. Don't ever do that. Okay? Here's a piece of good drug advice. When you take acid, take the amount of acid you're going to take, and then you have to be okay with that's the amount of acid you took. If it doesn't work, and don't try to take an additional bit of acid. That is a good way to go from I'm not really tripping to oh my god I'm tripping too hard. It's a really good way to do that. Because some acid is slow come on acid. Acid is so weird. It's got that kind of one time I take it and it's like within 30 minutes I'm tripping hard and then it's kind of weird out after having this so many hours. And sometimes it's like I took it, almost forgot I took it, and like 3 hours later I started tripping. You know? What made you want to up the dosage? Did you like the second experience and you wanted to repeat it? And then you liked that and you thought, but I want a little juicier, and so I like the way you approached it. I think that's a smart way to approach it. Sounds like you did a great job of taking drugs. But I'm curious as to what made you want to go bold and add another 125 after that 500. It wasn't hard enough, or what? I wouldn't want to take acid with my mom. That does not sound like a good idea. I would like to take acid with my dad. That would be weird. But I don't think my dad wants to take acid with me. Well, it makes me wonder, he's 83. Like, maybe he'd be like, yeah, well, hell not. I don't know. If I were to say, you want to take mushrooms, maybe. If he doesn't have to smoke anything. If I asked him to smoke anything, he wouldn't do that. I'm not that I've ever asked him to, but I can just tell he doesn't want to smoke anything. But if it was like, you want to eat some mushrooms with me, he might. Not totally inconceivable, especially if I send him some articles about therapeutic value and stuff. Oh, wow, it's useful, maybe. And then Michael Smith, were you like, Mom, listen, remember your acid wisdom. We are at peace. Fuck you. You made this mess. You clean it up. So, that's good. Good. What you're basically saying is you're super fucking tired from SE. I've been doing things. It's hard. Alright, I'm going to call it a night. See you later, everybody. CJ O'Connell hopefully will be streaming soon, so check that out. If you want to put that link there right now, it would be a good time to do that. And hasta la vista, baby, because I'm turning into Arnold Schwarzenegger and playing kindergarten cop of my bed.